everyone. Thanks for joining us. We have two wonderful poets with us today, Jim Daniels and John Feins. Jim will read first, and then John. Jim Daniels' new book of poems, Gun/Shy, Wayne State University, will be published in August. Other recent books include his fiction collection, The Perp Walk 2019, and his anthology, Respect, the Poetry of Detroit Music 2020, co-edited with M.L. Liebler, both published by Michigan State University Press. He is a recipient of 2 fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts. He has read his poetry on Garrison Keillor's Prairie Home Companion, and his poems have been featured on Keillor's Writer's Almanac. Poet laureates Billy Collins, Ted Kooser, and Tracy K. Smith have all showcased his writing as part of their work to bring poetry to average Americans. His poem, Factory Love, was displayed on a race car and is sending poetry to the moon this year as part of the Moon Arts Project. A native of Detroit, he lives in Pittsburgh. Daniels has written lucidly and compassionately about the working class, his son, and everyday Americans. His poetry is accessible, deeply poignant. Here's a superb poet, Jim Daniels.
Hey, thank you. Can everyone hear me? Are we good?
Yes.
All right. I'm just going to jump right in and read some poems that'll kind of introduce me to you, I hope. This first is called Red Vinyl, and it's basically a connection that I hope John appreciates, my old student, about the connections between music and poetry. So it's called Red Vinyl because it was about a red record. You know, most of the vinyl we are familiar with was black, but this is a record by the J. Giles Band called Bloodshot, came out on red vinyl, and it's dedicated to Peter Wolf, the lead singer for that band that had a special relationship with Detroit. And the epigraph for the poem, some of their deep, profound lyrics. Ain't nothing but a party, ain't nothing but a party, ain't nothing but a house party. And you have to understand, this is Detroit in a school that surrounded a Chrysler plant. So we kind of knew what our futures were looking like. We danced on aisles, on seats, shouted ourselves raw. The next day, ears ringing, we sat stunned in dull classrooms, listening to the drone of old English poets, telling us some crap about love, I guess. Our teacher talked about the I am, when we wanted the I am you sang about, while Magic Dick moaned on his harp, his afro breaking wave as he rocked, as he blew and blew. That ringing in my ears was poetry, I know now, pissed off and boasting, poetry with shades on. You danced crazy over the stage, them's the feet I thought were neat. You spouted, you shouted your rhythm and blues rhymes. We were stupid white boys who worked on cars and had no imagination. We did poorly in school without even style to fall back on. We packed monster stereos into our junker cars and rocked loud enough to sing along without shame. While in English class, we whispered and stuttered. Your best album, Bloodshot, stamped on red vinyl, circled our turntables and damp basements like a neon cherry. Our futures, plain black vinyl, already a little warped, bald tires and bad news, dirty oil and rust. So why not shout a little first, telling wild stories at parties where I could lose the point, get a laugh and maybe a red kiss from a mixed up girl with dirty blonde hair. She's kissing everyone, but I don't care. I take it home, my ears ringing. I write that kiss down, pressing hard. So that's about how I got started writing, really. Just by recognizing that I could write about my ordinary life. Since Harry mentioned the poem on the roof of the race car, Factory Love, I thought I would read it. It's an older one, but it stood the test of time in some ways. So I was working afternoon shift at the Ford plant from 3 to 11. And I was working a lot of overtime at the time, 7 days a week, 10, 12 hours a day. And so I became kind of attached to my machine. And when I would come in, because, 3 shifts, days, afternoons, and midnights, my machine would be messed up. There was a little feeling like jealousy or something about who was working my machine before me. So I wrote this love poem to my machine, Factory Love. Machine, I come to you 800 times a day like a crazy monkey lover, in and out, in and out, in and out. And you hardly ever break down, such clean welds, such sturdy parts. Oh, how I love to oil your tips. Machine, come home with me tonight. I'll scrub off all the stains on your name, grease and graffiti. I'm tired of being your part-time lover. Let me carry you off into the night on a high-low. That guy at midnights, I know he drinks and beats you. Okay, so I am now, and have been, though I'm shortly retiring, been a faculty member teaching poetry. And so I thought I would kind of turn the tables on this, which is a poem about being a teacher, but also remembering what I was like when I was this kid's age. So it's a crazy story about a student who plagiarized, he turned in Black Sabbath lyrics as his own poem. And so part of me, at first I thought, isn't it funny, this kid turned in Black Sabbath lyrics, and thought I wouldn't recognize it, and thought it was his own poem. But then I started thinking about why he might do that. And I remembered this lost kid at a Black Sabbath concert when he was younger, which was me. Mega Everything, it's called. And the epigraph is from War Pigs by Black Sabbath, again, deep and profound. Generals gathered in their masses, just like witches at black masses. Evil minds that plot destruction, sorcerer of death's construction. The kid with stringy blonde hair and torn Megadeth t-shirt plagiarized song lyrics in his poem. Black Sabbath, I said. In my tiny gray office, he idly kicked the metal desk, not meeting my eyes, but then he never did. 1972, Michigan State Fairgrounds. Black Sabbath ripped through the sharp muffle of Paranoid on the distant stage while I guzzled malt liquor from quart bottles on a gloomy Saturday afternoon. Ozzy stalking on stage scared me in a familiar Detroit way, like a biker gang crashing a high school party. I shook it off. I raised my fist. The kid said turning in the lyrics was a test, but would go no further. Had I passed? Those lyrics, the only semi-coherent thing he'd turned in all term. He could have fooled me with Megadeth lyrics. Perhaps he had. We agreed that he should drop. He hesitated at the door like there might be one more thing. 16, my ears buzzed with Dark Star feedback, barking dogs, bloody teeth, fragments of a thorough ass kicking. Ozzy's wire cutter rasp asked what happened when we died and where exactly was the soul. When a thunderstorm arced down on us, no one fled. We stood and we took it. Poetry was all I had that wasn't toxic. I should have been easier on the kid. His name was Chris. He slumped away, black boots clomping against the floor, and I never saw him again. The bitter mascara of the unrepentant and the flawed jewel of self-absorption. Ozzy's damaged now beyond coherence. He hadn't yet bitten the head off a bat when I saw him in 72. He only had to do it once. The rest of us, Chris, we think about it every day under the black, incoherent moon. Okay, and are we doing here? I'm gonna jump to a poem about my own kids, and who are now grown up, as you can imagine. But there's a moment that most people have had as a child and a parent or both, where there's the kind of pulling away, the inevitable pulling away from your parents to create your own life. And my son did a gap year, and he was a volunteer for City Year, which is an AmeriCorps program. He was working at as a tutor in a middle school in Miami, Florida, for a year, and he was leaving at the age 18 to do this. Now, in this house in Pittsburgh, it's not like Miami, but it gets hot in the summer. We only had one air conditioner. It was in our bedroom, so the kids, suffered with fans in their room. But on this particular occasion, we used the heat as a way to maybe come a little closer together. It's called Heat of Departure. 90 degrees of thick, rude heat, a summer guest we can't get rid of, hovering over our city, our brick house. Yet our son, who's leaving home tomorrow, we wish would stay. No AC in his room, but a window unit in ours for wicked waves like this. He's almost 18. Can't sleep, he says. And though we've offered before, now he quickly slips his mattress on the floor in our room and plops down, 6'5". His own room wrecked with packing. His last 3 nights, a man sprawled back into a boy before us. The heat, we all kept saying, it's awful. In the morning, I rise early and turn off the AC, just to hear him breathing. Okay. And I'm going to read a couple poems from the new book that's coming out in August, Gun Shy, and see where we go with that. Some of these poems are kind of about being between things, and this is, and I know my audience is older like me, and so you may remember that Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix died very close to each other the same year. And when I was in high school, it turned out. And so this is called Between Double Doors. It's about basically being stuck there at the entrance to the high school while they had the drug-searching dogs going through our lockers one day. So, Between Double Doors. We stood inside the main entrance to Fitzgerald High. Janis Joplin died, somebody said. Her too, I said. Hendrix just 2 weeks gone. Too young to have loved either of them. Homeroom, then first period. October, and school already sucked. Why were we stuck sandwiched between doors? I squeezed my bag lunch. No cafeteria for me and my brothers. We'd gone in together on a stereo, allowed in the basement if we kept it down. Keeping things down, not something we did well. Jimmy and Janice weren't big at our school. I wasn't big myself, thin as a locker with the heart of an elf. So maybe elves have big hearts. Maybe I have to take that back. Somewhere between the hoods and the hippies, I fell through cracks into the DMZ. When was I going to be all of something? I counted on the cracks, stuck between doors while they brought dogs in to sniff our lockers. I didn't know much, but I knew not to keep my stash at school. Jimmy and Janice, the names almost sang together like Jack and Jill up that hill. Tumbling down, Jill tumbling after. We had no hills in Detroit, nor bikes without motors. I liked the scream of them. Guitar, his guitar, her voice, searing burn of my first raging grief when Marlene died that summer, nowhere near 27. Listening to them, I smelled the awful crackle and pop, a basement fire, the dryer pilot, gas spill. Turn it up, turn it down, folded notes from a girl flaking into ash beside the garage. I wasn't too young to love drugs. Even my brothers disapproved, one a jock, the other a hood. Janice died. I did not shrug. You can never get back that pure loneliness. I keep looking for a better word, getting lost. The dark center of a car's lighter, surrounded by the searing orange coil. Standing in the middle of nowhere between locked doors, who should I listen to? What better than to scream? I should have. It wouldn't have killed me. Okay. Sometimes we mourn things that are disappearing that we kind of took for granted. And for me, one of those things is the phone booth. I don't know how many phone booths you encounter everywhere, but I remember them being very dramatic places when I had to use them. So I wrote a poem called Still Life with Phone Booth. It's a prose poem, which means the lines just kind of run on in a kind of quick way, but hopefully you can follow. I'm kind of riffing on the idea of a phone booth, or I think I am. Still life with phone booth. Upright coffin of human odors, hopeless ash of stale smoke, metallic moist panic, dried spit and blood on scratched plexiglass, emotion emergency, muffle and echo and clank of receiver dangled, impenetrable steel cord spooled so you cannot cut it, walk away and talk to God. Come pick me up, accident, beat up, abandoned, need. Nothing casual about phone booth words. Anyone watching? Anyone waiting? Any air left? Can I help you? They cannot help you. Operator in a safe dry room with a bag of Fritos and a Coke, family photos, inspirational sayings and pictures of cats. Cars slosh through puddles, blurring the world. Rain rattling off that public cage. Where to begin? Where to end? Whose numbers are memorized and why? Hers stuck in there, maybe scratched with a key. What would she say now if you called? Funny, I've been thinking of you? Would she hang up, laugh? Could you warm cold, wet hands around her voice, start your car with it, drive across 3 states, pull up out front and announce, I'm back? Close your eyes and press your head to the greasy smear of someone else's head. You have 1 minute left. You have 5 seconds, 4, 3, 2, 1. How can I help you? How can you help me? Where to begin in that false light, true darkness? Coins tremble on the metal tray. Insert to continue. Buy more time for bewildered anguish. Tell me about your sins, and I'll tell you about my penance. The empty coin return, the clawing fingers. And I'm going to finish up with a short little poem because in my neighborhood here in Pittsburgh, nobody, I think, is interested in me being a poet. That's just fine with me. So this is called Honorary Honor. And thanks for listening and inviting me. And I'm looking forward to hearing from John in a minute. Honorary Honor. Poet laureate of my neighborhood until I took out the garbage on the wrong day. For poets, every day is garbage day, I said. Tell that to the landfill, they said. They appointed the blind woman across the street to replace me. She's loud but polite. Poet laureate of my house until I forgot to make my bed. I'm just gonna lie in it anyway, I said. They said, you're sleeping on the job, and appointed the dog instead. His poem's untranslatable, but he offers protection. Now I'm poet laureate of my closet. Everyone loves me there, alone in the dark. I'll stop there.
That's great, Jim. Jim, I have a couple of questions I'd like to ask. Maybe you answered the first one already with one of your poems, but here it is. When did you write your first poem?
Okay, that's a good question. And I distinctly, see, in high school, there weren't a lot of writers there, but so I wrote, I didn't know I was writing poetry. And this English teacher said, oh, I just showed him my writing, my thoughts. And he said, oh, you're writing poems. And he started dividing them up into lines and saying I was writing poetry. So I remember my first two poems. One was my first real poem, and one was what I thought poetry was supposed to be about. So one was this horrible, self-pitying teen angst poem. I'll just quote you a couple lines from it. I who am about to die, I who weep but cannot cry. I am losing my mind, you say. Perhaps I think it went astray. See, that wasn't a poem. But the first real poem I wrote, I was working in a liquor store all through high school, illegally, because I was too young, really. But I wrote a poem called Growing Up in a Party Store. We call them party stores in Detroit. And I rhymed the names of penny candy that we sold there along with the names of liquor. So I was writing about something I knew and something I cared about from an insider's perspective. And that was a big lesson for me that, to write about things, include details.
Well, that's one of the fine things about your poetry. I've talked with John about your writing in the past, about your use of particulars. And before I say anything more, I would just like to ask you one more question. What is it that attracts you to poetry, to the poetry form?
Well, that's a good question. I do write fiction too, as you noted from the intro. But what attracts me about poetry is the compression of language. Because I write a lot of narrative poems that tell stories, but I like really squishing them down so that, it's so tight. It's like a snowball, you just pack it real tight and it has a little more impact. Not that I was going to hit anyone with my snowballs, but you know what I mean. So yeah, I would say the compression.
Well, I love your real life experiences that you use, your clarity, and as I mentioned, your particulars. If you don't mind, I would just like to ask you about the way you write. Like let's take a couple examples. You talk about the between double doors, and you're talking about that, and then you mentioned the car's lighter and its orange coil. Real vivid, particular image, and then you in the another one, still life with phone booth, you're looking at, and you put us right there with you. So as you're writing the poem, is your mind focused on that particular, I don't know if you wrote it all in one, way, or if you went back and cut things, but just looking what we have to look at the poem itself, you just seem to be so much there and everything puts us right there. And I'm wondering if is it totally conscious? Do your poems arise out of emotion, or are you a very, just a very conscious writer about the way the poem moves? How do you just talk to me about that one of those poems?
Okay, yeah. So I try to be unconscious in the first draft. As the poet William Stafford said, there'd be no such thing as writer's block if everyone's standards were as low as mine. So I just let it flow and I don't worry about it. And that's one of the highs of writing poetry. That is addicting, really. I mean, when you're in the moment and you just can't stop writing, that's pretty cool. And so, for example, the phone booth poem just sort of streamed out. I was thinking of a very specific phone booth that I wrote another poem about. So I was really writing, I wrote two phone booth poems at the same time. But so typically my first drafts are much longer than the final draft. So they tend to be really loose and just to get everything down. And then I spend a lot of time trying to compress them, like I said just a minute ago about the compression, without losing the voice. Because I want this sort of casual voice to come through, but not dilute it with a lot of, extra words. So that's my process, just to get it all down at once and then go through a series of revisions. Often each one is shorter than the last.
Do you always focus on the external?
I usually start with an external. So I always have little pieces of paper like this, where I'm writing down notes and ideas that when I have time, I develop them into poems. And it's usually something I see, some image that snags my attention a little longer. And there's something, sometimes it triggers a memory, like seeing a phone booth somewhere, or sometimes it's just the thing itself in the situation that it's in its surroundings.
Well, thank you for educating me. Before we bring on John, I would just like to reminisce a little bit about Detroit. I worked there on a picture called Blue Collar.
Oh, yeah.
We stayed at the St. Regis on Grant Avenue, and we worked at, we shot the first scenes in Kalamazoo at the Checker Cab Company because the major companies wouldn't let us use their plant. It's much smaller, but that's one thing. And that time, that was 1978, and I used to walk down town, Wayne Street. I think it was Wayne Street. It was kind of funky, the downtown area at that time. And then the other thing that I remember, Iggy Pop was talking one time about the sound of his music, and he says, well, he writes his music because it has the sound of Detroit, and to him, Detroit was the sound of an electric razor. But I noticed that you've, your Detroit music work that you have coming out, I believe. And what high school did you go to? And maybe I already read it, but what college did you go to?
Oh, I went to Alma College, which is a small liberal arts college in the middle of Michigan, as they do in Michigan. They hold up the palm, and it's right in the middle of the mitten. And it was smaller than my high school, and maybe you got a little taste of me not behaving very well when I was in high school. So I needed to go away, and where nobody knew me, and I could sort of try and get rid of some of my bad habits. And Alma was the perfect place to do it. In fact, in 2 weeks, I'm their commencement speaker.
Oh, that's great. Well, I'm glad that
the teachers there remember me.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
I was just saying that's because all the teachers I had are gone, so I'm clear there from all the trouble I caused while I was there.
Well, you turned out good. I don't know what you did, but whatever it was, you turned out great. And I'm honored to have you here. I read your poetry years ago, and then when I met John Feins, I believe it was in the 80s, we talked about you, and John said, here's a poet I think you would be interested in and have some camaraderie with. And I'm grateful to John for that. And also I'm grateful to know that John studied with you at Carnegie Mellon. So it's bringing together of two wonderful people. And now, so thank you very much, Jim. It's been a real honor and pleasure to hear your poetry and to meet you on Zoom. And now we'll introduce John Feins. John Feins is an American poet and musician born in New York City with ancestors on the Lewis and Clark expedition. He has traveled and worked widely throughout the United States, including in a hospital operating room, on a farm, in manufacturing, and on the front lines of creative rights and attainment through projects and associations with many of the most notable poets, writers, musicians, comedians, filmmakers, and visual artists in history. I have always admired John's poetry and his generosity toward his fellow poet. What he wrote about poetry exemplifies his own. Quote, poetry is condensed and musical evocation of life's deeper, higher, and wider perception. End of quote. A splendid poet, John Feins.
Thank you, Harry. Good afternoon. Haiku is not only the pinnacle of poetry, it's the pinnacle of literature. And in my earlier days, like Jim's, I'd probably be willing to get into a bar fight and say it's the pinnacle of all the arts. Here's one called Immaculate Conception. Flashes of water splash over mossy boulders. The way has no name. Now, I'll give you one pro tip today. I won't do this again, but I'll give you one pro tip about haiku, because all the stuff you see about haiku is not haiku. It's haiku. People take one line and they just hack it into 5, 7, 5, the 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables, and then it gets written up and everywhere as haiku. That's not haiku. Haiku is 3 distinct lines. The first 2 lines are discrete. and they're kind of connected. And it should be about nature, but we could let that one go. Traditionally, haiku is about nature, but two discrete lines that are connected. And then the third line takes a leap of perception, kind of a magic leap of consciousness. It goes a little bit more. So that's true haiku, and you don't see it so much. So one more time. Flashes of water splash over mossy boulders. The way has no name. When I was 15, I read a book called Plagues and Peoples. It was all about how plagues had formed, all of history. The story of history is the story of plagues and epidemics. And somehow, as a result of reading that book, I always knew we'd see one. I just always knew I'd live to see one. But the interesting thing is, it's not all bad. A lot of times, good comes out of it. That might be hard medicine to take today, but it's true. Here's a story from that book, and see if it wouldn't make a good movie. Jack Straw's Castle. Once upon a time in Albion, 7 centuries ago, 3 men led a peasants' revolt after the Black Death. Under subterfuge and pseudonyms, Jack Straw may have been a preacher, according to the Church of St. Mary in Great Baddow in Essex. He led an ill-fated crowd from the churchyard there to the risings. Straw and his followers murdered notable local figures in Bury, and after reaching the capital, killed several of its Flemish residents. People suppose he was executed along with the revolt's other leaders. Tyler got laid low at Smithfield, and then Straw, along with John Ball, stole away but were found hidden in an old house and beheaded. The executioners invented a confession where Jack states the insurgents' plans were to kill the king and all landowners, bishops, monks, canons, and rectors of churches, and then set up their own laws and set fire to London. Though all the leaders and many of the men died, after the revolt, Parliament gave up trying to control wages. The hated poll tax was never raised again. Lords treated peasants with more respect and made more of them free men, and this marked the end of the feudal system. A legend pub on the edge of Hampstead Heath, reputed to be highest in all the city, beloved by many a colorful luminary, is now gone, converted 20 years ago into luxury apartments, and today stands empty. It had commemorated the preacher by name, from a story of lore that he had addressed groups of rebels on the heath from an old hay wagon that became known as Jack Straw's Castle. Wouldn't that be a good movie? If you want to buy the film rights to that poem, I'll set you up with my agent, and you don't have to worry, he's only half beast, half man. So poets don't work in forms anymore. I like forms. I think that they're a good challenge, and I work in them. This one's a Villanelle. It's only 19 lines. Half the lines repeat. It ought to be easy as pie, and they will bedevil you to the end. I don't know if there's been a good one in 3 generations since Dylan Thomas wrote Do Not Go Gentle. This is He Had a Face Like the Sky. He had a face like the sky, eyes wild and blue as the wind, a beautifully doomed defiance tonight. From the soles of torn boots he'd cry, rainfall fingers on guitars of spruce. He had a face like the sky. Septembral in the sweet by and by, no telling all the places he'd been, a beautifully doomed defiance tonight. Every moment a blazing occasion of desire, a flamenco dancer on the head of a pin. He had a face like the sky. He knew his soul could never die, so long as he'd so lived the passion, a beautifully doomed defiance tonight. He flew to the top of the world most high. To prove her true love, he must win. He had a face like the sky, a beautifully doomed defiance tonight. Well, time for a few Los Angeles poems. When I was a kid, I learned movies. My dad was a movie buff. He took me to the Cameo Theater, next town over, one screen, first run films. And he had to tell me what a cameo was. And so I always knew what a cameo was and always thought cameos were cool. Little did I know when I moved to Los Angeles, a cameo could be the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Cameo is a big deal. Because when I moved there, I got to, I was nobody living in a crap apartment with noisy neighbors. I had a low-paying job. I'd wake up at 10, get to the job at 10:30, and I wouldn't get out till 10, 11, sometimes midnight. And then I'd go get a pizza and start it all over again. And I couldn't stand to be away from my guitar that long. So I'd bring my guitar and, I'd get the proverbial 15-minute break, and I'd go in this horrible alley outside the building and play guitar for 15 minutes. And one day this bird kind of came along and was part of the scene. This is Earth Cameo. Me and a bird show our feathers and fly our tongues one hot falling evening as I drive my axe in an alley on break. Raw garbage and tossed trash nobody ever picks up. Sound from the wall as cars slide by like cards drop from broken hands. Me and a bird and 7 or 8 million talk about how the planet rattles and rolls in the deep pockets of night morning, all of a sudden slumber to tumble, fallen from a cage to face strange flashes and dust up from faulty lost bedrock. Me and a bird make a world record, cut between lightfall and night rise, a sight for sore eyes, temporary immortality in the capital of nowhere, a bitter elixir. We harbor a kind of silence while our friends die in bright cubicle crucibles, fields of green fronds in the breeze above, a carved heart in the tar below. Me and some bird in a coming sky, full sail and hailing. Give us a home and even a stranger waves, from dead power lines down to jack straws, after the fusillade, in between floods, surrounded by barbed fencing. All we must do is save our great song again. So I love film noir. I can watch any film noir anytime, anywhere, which I've done this past year. Bogart, Mitchum, two of my top two after Harry Northup. And so I thought, why should film have all the fun? So when I lived in LA, I wrote poem noir. And this is one, Western Avenue. This city coughs smog and bleeds its premises, mainlines milk to infants and puts a ring in its nipple. Golden November sunset wounded with rose throws halos over the basin's circuit breaker range as overtones from the northern mountains, tuned tectonically and zoned by the ocean, flash chromic ragas. Dark falls fast and consumes the bright skyscapes as if there was a past. The red neon tide is loose. Spectral red wind booms from far off as wrists and grips begin a red metallurgy. My vehicle feels like an eye, hand, or tongue, a trenchant sensor in the Western motherboard. We indulge hungers ravenously through cherry groves of traffic lights, rocking out of these gutters a sure veracity toward mortal orchards of falling stars. So y'all are lucky to have Harry. Harry is not one of these poets confined to his own hustle, like so many. He does everything. And you've got this show, and he's got a Coinga Press. And when I was producing events in LA, he'd bring me like a complete reading of Song of Myself by Walt Whitman. He's the real deal in the tradition of Pound and Ginsberg and people who just go the limit to do everything for poetry. And so he's got this webpage, and one time he asked his community, is Los Angeles a literary community? And predictably, everyone starts waxing rhapsodic. It was sicker than the Grammys, celebrating themselves, and everybody's puffing up LA as this literary community. And I thought, oh man, it falls on me to be the tough love guy. And so I responded in the form of a poem. One poet didn't speak to me for years after this, so consider yourselves forewarned. The Book of Angels. El Pueblo de la Reina de Los Angeles, born of the book, the paginated seed, planted in desert sand with a spoonful of stolen water where the mounts meet the sea, planted on faulty grounds to be harvested by the people of the book, Occidental doppelganger of old holy lands, old holy scrolls rolling on the end beginnings of old holy roads. Los Angeles, the most of everything, the best of nothing, No cradle of revolution here, no one if by land, with monoxide traffic jams, faux posers and sycophants. Your children of the book must take the A-plane from your third world airport, hail subterranean rails of the alpha wild island Manhattan to find signs and wonders of street life, or thus thumb with the wind for Frisco gold, then ascend the old trail up to Assisi's other city, the Royal City, City of the Holy Faith, Santa Fe. Los Angeles, you must go through all the fake tinsel to find the real tinsel underneath, strung out on velvet ropes and openings, tent poles of trash and rehash, a CPA's approach to art craft. In San Francisco, they worship the devil, but in Los Angeles, they make a deal with him. Los Angeles, the past isn't what it used to be. In 310, 213, in matters literary, through all your stages, in all your scenes. But on any morning, on any screen, any 11 million, near as the eye can see, all green lights and sunglasses, you're anything you need. Los Angeles doesn't really believe it's in the big leagues beyond TV, at least not nearly as it should be. The city of almost, a city approximately. So that's all she wrote. As anyone who's everyone knows, imagination's still sheriff, way down around the shimmering mirages and empty blowing pages, all scrounging angels looking for traces of stars too far to see and be seen, way down above Angel Town. So let's blow that smog out of here with Cool Breeze of Summer. In the cool breeze of summer, between meteors and fireflies, and you were still alive, and I was alive too, bareback, on the loose, quantum riders in haze afternoons, unfazed and tuned to gun the engines and run for Saturday night. Time was never on our side. We had to seize the present like an act of sex. It's a long time until tomorrow, and you never know. In the cool breeze of summer, the river runs dry, one of 5 worst Julys ever. Everybody tense, a little mad as capitals crack and the land gets weird. People wake up tired and hide from the sun with doubts about job, spouse, and selves, while kids ride skateboards, bikes, choppers at the dark end of the street and smoke cigarettes on the playground seesaw. In a cool breeze of summer on the phone to Frisco, a thunder lightning storm blows in. A raven's feather comes spinning down as we speak of magic. In the cool breeze of summer comes a fall, a spell of blessed rain, a hard drought buster to take you out to flamenco, sorceress and light show, percussion possession, guitar and castanet, her eyes, her sweat, her duende storm the stage in a rage of love's elan. In cool breeze of summer, sometimes music is an answer, but some nights defy the needle, and you need higher ground, like a night bird, her high winsome sound through the fog out over the south, and the world go round. Young souls in New Avalon, we're the only ones who will fly this sky in the cool breeze of summer, horizon on fire. Everybody leaps and dances, makes advances past last chance fields, in the swelter by the sweet swing sway of an old revenant apple tree. One of the ways poets cheat is they dedicate poems to famous people. You know, James Dean or Audrey Hepburn. You write a poem and you dedicate it to Audrey Hepburn. How can you lose? I mean, I might as well dedicate all my poems to Audrey Hepburn, but I'll take it you can assume that. But I did know Michael McClure, who was, I thought, the great poet of the American language living. And I knew him in several cities and several experiences and thought the most of him. And when he died last May, I was somehow able to write this the next day. Sing Forest Twilight. Leathered lion on summer savanna, ride shotgun while I drive like a toreador to Indigo, to the next show. Next after party. We don't divide day and night, work and play, black and white. We skip over dimensions like river polished stones flung from childhood, still going. and no boundaries ever contain us. We trip on thin air, the depths of the ancient way, the second sight. We know secrets of consuming light for subsistence and spring wisdom, and pass through lucky fire for initiation. Long-maned front rangers who command from sprawling foothill majesty to angelized crown peak, up above all creation, where we transform all we survey from earthly matter entropy into intergalactic word immortality. So I was doing business one time in Oklahoma City, and I went to the bomb memorial, and I was totally unprepared for what I saw. I'd love to know if there's another place on earth where human beings have transformed catastrophic evil into love and the insistence of triumph over good. So the bomb memorial blew me out, and I was so emotionally wrought by it that I couldn't sleep that night. I got maybe 2 hours of sleep. My meetings ran late, and I left for a 1,000-mile, 12-hour ride home at about 1 p.m. on a Friday. And I'm about halfway back, 2/3 back. My boss calls me and says, well, we need you to know something. I was in the company car, and she said, the car's been reported as stolen. Now, don't panic, don't panic. If they throw you in jail, we'll come get you on Monday. So that was great. And it was this white car with these huge logos on the doors. And so I thought, man, maybe I can hide until there's at least some darkness. I did not want to spend the weekend in a Texas jail, even knowing I'd get bailed out. And so I couldn't go to a rest area or a restaurant. I didn't know what to do. And then in the Texas Panhandle, when that sun comes down, it's glaring, intense light, because I was headed west. And in the distance, I saw these objects sticking out of the ground in this huge field. And there was no signs or anything, but I thought, let me go check it out. And it turned out to be the Cadillac Ranch. At the Cadillac Ranch, riders plant spray paint cans in hoed rows of topsoil for a harvest of color come dusk rise. Across the continent, solar shoots ray long and low beyond golden interstates made of light. Over the high, fiery Panhandle Plain, far south of the heartland, this land was never easy. On a vast, dusty promontory, you can feel tough and rumbling souls who braved wind and winter, searing summer suns and righteously hostile tribes. In a savage passage along the dark arc of the industrial age, cars replaced horses, graven images replaced nature, and now we blast music where sand once blasted eyes. At the Cadillac Ranch, on the spur of the instant, you park on gravel along a lean frontage road outside Amarillo to walk the brown land in lone Texas light with a few fellow drivers on high-speed pilgrimage to yield a bumper crop of Americana and spray your name in gold-flecked, cherry red, flame white, and electric blue, atop many thousand other names, over multicolored pieces half an inch thick, dropped like autumn leaves into rich alluvium where nothing ever grows, but dreams of more Americana, more travel, so many happy returns, or just one more flashing moment of laughter and forgetting on a rock that wheels around a ball of fire in the slow wane of empire in the fast lane on the long road home. So last time I read, it was Harry's fault also, a while ago, and Louis McAdams was there, Mary Garcetti's office. Louis is the poet who saved the LA River, like single-handedly, and made the great film on Jack Kerouac, and it's one of those poets who did more than, again, confined to his own hustle, far more. Louis died last year. He gave me a beautiful compliment that day that I will always treasure, and this was one of the poems that day that he heard. And, you know, some films are like Ferris Bueller, Pulp Fiction, you know, they're kind of entertainment over the characters are living like a day or two or three. But I like films like Giant and Raintree County and Dr. Zhivago that sweep over generations and tell us something about the human condition. This is not a 3-hour poem, but it aspires to cover a little more turf than the usual. For the ages. In the flaring night between all times, into this world as the crow flows, by falling autumn leaves, you come back from 7 down, only to wind up at a barren bar, flipping through screens, way back to when the kids of the flowers strung melodies over the highways and laced the fruit of the mountain valley with laboratory fusions of alchemistas. Kid Galileo, kid at heart, maybe you were born out of time, too late to save our century, too late to sing through the circuitry, left all alone to do the Babylon shakedown down through the dark Cold War nights. Maybe you were out of time, but sure in the right aeon, sure in your right mind, bred into a new form and baptized in waters reglitterized to fight the revolution evolved in the next ice age. Your youth was a masterpiece, an archon initiation. There's no reason not to believe in everything, and in a way we're still blessed, given arms to run and lips to fly by the saving winds. Gather your fall. Apples fall far in this terrain. You can't camouflage your heart, but your scarlet scars blend in with the sundown. Shake a promised hand, our name known in a land full of fishers of men, flyboys and spyboys riding the days to the ruby rain in the wild high country where sage is born. I just got back from Arizona, where I stayed alone in the desert overnight, or at least alone in terms of human beings, to reconnect with some old ways that I got introduced there years ago in a tremendously magical story at a pivotal time in my life. This one is regards a trip I took up to South Dakota to see Sundance, the Lakota ritual, and it goes out to all the sisters and brothers on the Good Red Road, and for all my relations. Aho mitakwayasa, survivors. I came to a world of spirits and whispering faces over the necks of bottles. But over the rainbows as above, so below the water drum, laced like fate over the wood and moon and preserved jars of medicine. Lavender is violet now. Up on the rosebud, I have seen the chief crying in the morning, reminding the grandfathers, we make mistakes. Nothing isn't all that's left. We are survivors. Seen in our fast oaths, there's more than a dream over those blankets and hang-ups, a show of feathers, these shadows of fathers, these offers, whatever it is we fear. I came to a world of warnings in search for one that's free, alone, always, but with you, only on separate rafts. When I moved back to northern New Mexico, I started watching the movies that took place here, and there was an obscure one called The Last Hit, shot right near here, some of it. And it was a CIA assassin who finally got out, and then he got brought back in to do one more hit. And it was a cool movie. And I was kind of hiking up in the ridgelines at the time, and he was scouting his prey up in the ridgelines. And I was also happened to be reading this book about CIA techniques at the time, really interesting book. And I was supposed to go up this one Friday to Telluride to see some friends from college I hadn't seen in forever. And this colossal ice storm blanketed the entire region. I mean, everything. And I was fit to be tied, and I was still in my work clothes, a trench coat and dress shoes. And I went downtown just to get out of the house and blow off some steam. The entire downtown was absolutely empty, nothing. And I started skating down San Francisco Street in my dress shoes like Bobby Orr on a breakaway. I was flying. It was pure ice. And I go by this door, and this voice calls out, "Hey, are you CIA?" It was a hobo with a cup of coffee and 3 or 4 dogs in a doorway. And I thought, man, leave it to Santa Fe. Even the hobos can read your aura. So I didn't get to go to Telluride, but I came home and wrote Winter Assassin. The Winter Assassin practices in the foothills, tracks prey along ridges. He prays for precision, a steel-edged grace beyond incision, to slice through space and nighttime like silver-coined words from the rocky rolling west of his mind. He rises long before dawn, as marrow rises in blood. He sprints up the hillside to glowing heights of peach rose gold over a cobalt sea. He sees ravens wing along pink daybreak over Galisteo Basin, sunlight woven on waves of Tejas wheat, low crosswinds over snowmelt in shimmering interstate distances. He used to be a joyrider wilding on icy black highways. Now he's skyclad in life sentences and meets you at the horses with a warrant for beauty. He sees you around, sees to the fire in a far field, says it's good to have a tree that feeds you, and cries into blinding drought light. He sees like a gyrfalcon while God talks through cactus and lava rocks. While God rocks through the whirlwind, the winter assassin fastens new tools. With articulate hands and blue eyes, he always aims at the heart.
Thank you, John. John, I just want to interrupt you, if I may. You have 1 minute left before our next show. And I don't know if you have a poem for that or if you would like to answer a question or two that I asked Jim. What would you like to do in that last minute?
Well, I better read a poem.
Pardon?
I'll read a poem. I'll finish with a poem.
Okay.
All right. This was written last spring during what was happening last spring. I pray that we rise up and find that we're the American race, and there's no categories and nothing that separates us. We're one people, and this is In Spring, the Music Rises. In spring, the music rises and architects the sky like lightning, swells in bare power and hot thrust of sexual youth. In spring, the music rises like sage meteor dawn in a trillionth of a second, universes in orature born. In spring, the music rises, may fragrance soft and wild as love under a fiery sun, gone at once to childhood and now. In spring, the music rises, mylar smiles lift off through orange skies and reflect back the light we are. Light grows stronger as it dies on the old road home and final return to tender bloom. In spring, the music rises like star rose mist over a rolling field spangled in blankets. In spring, the music rises, first peals of thunder rumble like chimes to the faithful assembled in our church of earth. In spring, the music rises, a voice neither beast nor man by the eye of a space needle, cosmic meeting place through time amid West Kansan Badlands, pyramids of the plains. Rocks have life in them, home of the wind and rain. In spring, the music rises, meadowlark and falcon, jackrabbit or coyote. 80 million years ago, this was all ocean. In spring, the music rises for those who missed the Renaissance, endless winter in your generations, endless search for vortices and key, lifetimes to find the door, the gate so straight, the way so narrow. Through thorns, you hear the clarion. In spring, the music rises, electricity up the spine, to a revolution of the heart, now revolution in the eyes.
Thank you, John, for that fabulous reading. You know, I appreciate your strength and your transcendence in your work. And thank you both, Jim Daniels and John Feins. It's been a real exalting reading for me, and hope to have you both back again sometime. And now TV waits for no man or no woman, and we're on to the next show with Amy Wieseneck. Thank you very much. Bye-bye, Amy.
Thanks, John and Harry.
Thank you so much.